It's time to throw on our checkered vans, crank up the 80s soundtrack, and dive into Fast Times at Ridgemont High. This 1982 classic gives us one of the most quotable high school movies of all time, launched multiple careers, and set the tone for coming-of-age films for decades. But does it still hold up, or is it just a relic of its time? Join us on this cinematic journey as we find out on this episode of The Regular Guy Movie Show.
Lights go down, let's hit play. Regular guys got something to say. The Regular Guy Movie Show, talking flicks. Here we go!
Welcome to The Regular Guy Movie Show, the podcast where we dig deep into the movies we grew up with and decide if they are still, well, maybe as watchable today, or if they are simply adrift in the currents of time. I'm Seth, and with me, as always, are my two favorite people in the world and my co-hosts, Justin and Brian. Gentlemen, are we ready to rewind and relive some cinematic nostalgia?
Absolutely.
Hey, why not? Let's do it.
All right, well, this week we are diving into Fast Times at Ridgemont High, a film that was a staple of the 1980s, but does it still deliver the same magic today? Let's break it down. Guys, when did you first see or come across Fast Times at Ridgemont High?
Well, I first saw it when I was 10 years old. I was in fifth grade. Didn't see it at the movie theater. Didn't see it on VHS. I saw it on HBO.
Okay.
Yeah. For two big reasons. Each reason has a nipple on it.
And Justin, when did you first watch Fast Times at Ridgemont High? How old were you?
Trying to put an age to this, I'd landed in somewhere between 12 and 13.
For me, it was somewhere in that 10 to 12 range. I definitely remember, I can remember the circumstances around it. I remember going to my friend Jeff Phipp's house. We were playing $3 because he had the giant backyard where we could play $3. And then after that, we went to Eric Esker's house because his parents were never home during the day, during the summer. And we put in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which was very enjoyable. I didn't really understand a lot of it at that time. There were certainly things I'd never seen before at that time. and you know, some certain VHS tracking issues during certain parts of the movie. But overall, it definitely made an impression.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it 12, 13 years old, you know, it had everything that a preteen boy would want, right? I mean, it was the drugs, you know, like hearing about those things and how cool it was to be involved in those, and you know, the boobs, and you know, you had just standing up to authority figures, and you know, all kinds of good stuff. It was a fun movie to watch at that time.
Interestingly enough, that so many people have seen this movie, and it kind of obtained its cult classic. And how did we see it as kids when we were all too young to see it at the movie theater? I mean, this was rated R. Mm-hmm. I was 7 years old when I came out of the movie theater. I'm not sneaking into an R-rated movie at 7. But after it was released, there was a new thing that came out called VHS.
Yep.
That extended its viewership to other people and to the younger crowd, because now we could watch it without having to get past that crusty old lady at the booth and sneak past at the movie theater.
You know, in more recent years, people have probably encountered it on AMC. Now, it's weird to think one of these movies is now an American movie classic, but it is. And I think I'm pretty sure I've also seen it more than a few times on VH1's Movies That Rock. And
yeah, I could see that.
And this viewing was probably the first time since I was 10 or 11 years old I saw the unedited or the actual full rated R version without some form of TV censorship.
Okay.
Because most of my viewing has been on basic cable outlets.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And it's really funny because and not to jump too far ahead, but one part that stuck out to me the most was whenever Spicoli was late to Mr. Hand's class for the first time and he ripped up his card, you know, his course schedule. He said in the unedited version, he says, "You dick."
You dick!
Exactly. But in my mind, I was waiting for "you butt." And I was like, because I'm so used to seeing it on, you know, the censored version that you would see on TV for the last, 30 years. So yeah, right there with you.
All right. Well, for those who may have somehow lived under a rock for the last 30, 40 so years, Brian, why don't you give him a little bit more of a synopsis of what this movie actually is about?
Certainly. Okay, so Fast Times at Ridgemont High is a classic coming-of-age teen comedy. Takes place in Southern California high school. The film follows a group of high school students navigating the challenges of adolescence, including relationships, friendships, and the pressures of growing up. The story touches on various high school experiences such as crushes, relationships, the pressure of social expectations, all while maintaining a humorous and sometimes satirical note.
And how did this movie do in the box office?
It actually did pretty good. It was a commercial success. It was a low-budget film. It cost only about $4.6 million to make. And in the movie theaters, it grossed over $27 million. That's a nice return on investment.
Not bad at all.
Yeah.
Not bad.
With such a young cast, nobody was expensive.
No, and actually goes beyond the cast. The writer and the director, also very young in the business.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much anymore. Both very well-known names. Directed by Amy Heckerling. Her first movie as a director, but not her last. Went on to go on directing films such as National Lampoon's European Vacation, Look Who's Talking, and Clueless.
Oh, wow.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good career.
And then on the writing side, the film was actually written by Cameron Crowe, who people would know more from Jerry Maguire, Say Anything, Vanilla Sky, and Almost Famous.
Mm-hmm.
And Almost Famous, which is it's very autobiographical about Cameron Crowe, who grew up very young, got into writing for rock magazines at an early age, ended up skipping a bunch of grades. And so then after that, when he was actually in his real life, in his 20s, he's like, you know what? I missed a bunch of years in high school. I'd like to find out what those were about. Went undercover in a high school for a year, and then used those experiences to write a book, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which he then wrote into a movie as well.
I find that incredibly creepy.
Absolutely.
He was 22 when he went back to high school to learn about things like the social hierarchy, the social stressors, what kids were doing. Because he did kind of miss that time, so he wouldn't know. The sexual budding of teens in high school. For a 22-year-old to go back and kind of witness that growth, I don't know. It gives me some 22 Jump Street vibes without the police. So yeah, I think there's a bit of a creep factor there.
Absolutely. But
an interesting tidbit back to the box office performance. I thought this was pretty interesting. We talked about the commercial success, but internationally it was not very well received. It released in Australia to one screen in 1983, and they had 0 reported ticket sales. But then it was released again in New Zealand all the way in 2022 to just one screen, and it had a whopping $236 in ticket sales.
wow.
That's huge. Huge.
Wait, $236, not 236,000,000, 236,000, 236.
$236. So maybe 10 people went to see it in that theater.
That's a trip to the grocery store.
Right.
So let's go ahead and transition here. Let's get into the characters. Justin, tell us about the people who brought this movie to life on screen.
First, we have the ultimate stoner surfer archetype, Jeff Spicoli, played by Sean Penn.
Hey, bud, let's party.
So Sean Penn, over his long career, has appeared in over 50 films. He's won 2 Academy Awards for Best Actor. That was for Mystic River and Milk. And while the 64-year-old actor is still active in film and television, his focus has shifted from acting to directing and writing.
I think it's safe to say he's probably the most accomplished actor in the cast.
Oh, in the
movie.
films, definitely. And I think if you were to make a Mount Rushmore of American actors, you could make an argument for Sean Penn being on there.
I wouldn't make that argument.
I'm just saying you could.
I suppose somebody could. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could make an argument that John Heder should be on there. It just wouldn't be a very strong one.
Judge Reinhold.
Yeah.
How do you feel though about his acting performance? Like, what were your takes on him as this stoner surfer archetype? Did he do it well, or was it a bit too much?
Oh, it was definitely over the top. I don't know if I would say that it was too much. I think it fit the character. I mean, I think more about if I were on set with Sean Penn, a method actor, being Spicoli all the goddamn time, I think I'd want to take a tack hammer to his forehead.
Yeah.
But
in fact, that's what I heard. During filming, in between shooting, in between scenes, when he was on set, he never came out of character.
yeah, that would be a bit much.
Yeah, that would be a bit annoying after a minute.
I'm so wasted.
All right. Next, we have Stacey Hamilton navigating first loves and heartbreaks, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Linda, I finally figured it out. I don't want sex. Anyone can have sex.
Yeah, Stacy, what do you want?
I want a relationship.
She wants love.
She does want love. Poor Stacey Hamilton.
She got quite a bit of love in this movie.
She sure did.
Mm-hmm.
In all the wrong places.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I thought it was strange, when I was younger and watching this movie, I watched it for her assets, right? Knowing that she's playing a character that's 16 years old and now being a full-grown adult and seeing those assets, I couldn't help but feel dirty.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of a theme that for me ran throughout in multiple points during this movie. On one hand, I know that they are adult actresses of age at the time they made this movie, but they're portraying teenagers. And yeah, I can't help but to feel, especially as a girl dad, a little conflicted about my enjoyment.
You hit the nail on the head as being a girl dad as well. Yeah, that made me feel weird. Kind of angry.
Darn growing up.
Right? Ruins everything.
Absolutely. Who do we got after Stacy?
We have Mark Ratner, the awkward but well-meaning nice guy, played by Brian Backer.
Smoking's upstairs to your left. Smoking's upstairs.
You remember when you could smoke in a theater? Like, I think that was before my time. Like, I also didn't smoke whenever I first started going to the movies, but I don't remember anybody smoking in the theater.
No, but I mean, the whole, even just back in the day, the idea of a smoking section was just so ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Even on airplanes.
Yeah.
Airplanes had a smoking section.
So, with Mark Ratner, tell me about his acting. Like, what did you feel like he really played that part of, the awkward, well-meaning nice guy?
Well, I think Mark overall was a fairly one-note character, very meek.
I think he was playing that high school kid who's kind of the wallflower. We all knew one.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you were one.
Probably was one.
Yeah, there you go. So I thought, like you said, there's not a whole lot he could do with that because that is what he was supposed to portray. I thought he did it well. But yeah, you're right. One note.
Up next, we have Mike Damone, the fast-talking hustler friend, played by Robert Romanus.
Listen, gentlemen, I perform a service here, and the service costs money.
Just curious. So a couple things. The first thing, I feel like every 1980s movie has a Damone character.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like high school bookies were a very common thing, or I'm sorry, not even a bookies. He was a scalper. Now, maybe it was just because I went to a high school that was nowhere near a concert venue. Mm-hmm. But when I see this, I can't relate to that whatsoever.
I can't either. And where did his accent come from?
Right.
Well, he's Southern California, and
right.
He's the only one with this like Bronx accent.
I was gonna say, what's a Jersey boy doing in Reseda, California? Right. And it was kind of nasally. But again, I didn't like him right off the bat.
Yeah, he did a really good job of being just a real slimeball.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm curious, though, in your personal life and, growing up and in the high school or whatnot, did any of you guys have a Damone type real life character?
Depends on how you define it. if you want to talk about the guy who's all mouth, all yak, no shack, bunch of bravado, but then when the chips are down, is a wimp.
Yeah.
Yes, I had plenty of those guys through my high school career come and go.
But to your question, Justin, yeah, in fact, I remember there was a guy when I went to high school with, we gave the nickname Tor, which is short for mentor, because he had to give us, tips about everything in life. And, when you're younger, you're like, oh man, Jason knows so many things. He's so wise. And then after a couple of years, you're like, oh man, Jason is so full of shit.
Yeah, and that's Damone to a T.
Yeah.
Right. Moving on, we have Linda Barrett, the confident and experienced friend, played by Phoebe Cates.
Don't bite. And slide it in.
I mean, she was hot.
Yeah, and I'm going to challenge, I don't know that she was that experienced.
Oh, I don't think so either.
I think she was a giant shit talker.
She might have been the female Damone.
I think she was. She was the female Tor.
She was. Did she really have a fiance that lived far away? What did he do?
Doug, he worked for the airline.
The airline.
In Chicago. The airline.
The airline.
There's only one, and it's in Chicago.
Is that kind of like the equivalent of a guy saying that he has
Canadian
a girlfriend?
girlfriend? Absolutely.
Canada? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think she actually believed she had a fiance. So I don't think she was lying about it. I think she was maybe exaggerating it. But yeah, she was the female Damone. She was giving advice when, she really didn't have that much experience herself.
But she dispenses the advice freely, and we'll get into more of that later. Generally speaking, I think she is just full of it.
Still hot, though.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Who else do we got to talk about?
Next, we have Brad Hamilton, the relatable older brother dealing with work and expectations, played by Judge Reinhold.
That is home, boys. They shall serve no fries before their time.
I think Judge Reinhold is an awful actor. I'm sorry. I don't know if you guys feel differently, but he's the exact same character in 1982's Fast Times at Ridgemont High as he was in The Santa Claus, playing Dr. Neil. It's the same guy. Like, there's no difference. There's
just with an additional weenie whistle fixation.
Exactly. But they talked the same. They acted the same. Like, he's one character for every film he's in.
Oh, he's a true one-trick pony.
Oh, it's awful.
It's a great trick.
I'd argue that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even think he was good.
No, he was really young in this movie. He wasn't good. And you're right. He plays that one guy. And he always plays that one guy.
I guess over time he got better at it.
And I think this one guy, in the case of this film, was, at least in my opinion, the best character of the movie.
You thought Brad Hamilton was the best character in the movie?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Explain.
Yeah.
Overall, I think he, number one, had a definable character arc. You see him at the beginning of the movie, riding high. He's six payments away from owning his car. He's making his own, calling the shots at the All-American Burger. He's getting his buddy us on board. He's got a hot-ass girlfriend. He is riding high. And over the course of the movie, we see him kind of decline. Has a few bad opportunities. Few things don't go his way. And his personality shifts. You'll see a change in Brad throughout. And he ends up becoming a bit of a hero at different spots. At least two times I can think of. One more of an emotional hero, one of just being like an action film badass.
I thought he had anger issues.
And that could very well be. Wouldn't you if you had to wear a pirate suit, at work?
All right, our last lead character is Mr. Hand, the strict teacher who may or may not secretly like Spicoli, played by Ray Walston.
Am I hallucinating here? Just what in the hell do you think you're doing?
I think Mr. Hand is probably, to me, he was the most influential character. And I like the way that he was such a hard ass in the beginning, but he really did have that soft spot for Spicoli, and he did want him to graduate. He showed up at his house, to make sure he did graduate. I thought he showed just such a neat timeline for his character.
So you think that he showed up at Spicoli's house to help him graduate?
I do.
See, I feel like he just went there just to be a dick.
just to waste his time for.
You have made my life hell for this school year. For just from my own amusement, I'm going to show up at your house and just be a dick.
Well, it was the whole, you're eating on my time. You're wasting my time. And then in the beginning of the movie, he talked about how, what if he went to his time and wasted his time?
He pre-sells it. He mentions it in the first
does.
class.
And he followed up with that threat. But I kind of think he liked him because at the very end, when Spicoli was like, am I going to graduate? Am I going to pass your class? And he says, I think you'll squeak by.
Yeah, but I felt that was more, I'm going to get you out of my class because I don't want you for another year.
Yeah.
I don't care if you whatever. I'm done with you. But I'm going to torment you a little bit more just for my own amusement. But I enjoyed it either way.
I think Mr. Hand just liked the artwork adorning Spicoli's room.
Absolutely. Beyond the cast we've already talked about, there were multiple notable appearances or cameos. Because really, this film in many ways was a launching pad for a lot of careers, not just for our lead actors. Who were some of the other people we saw in this movie?
Well, there was Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah, as Jefferson.
Yes. Boy, what a good football player.
He was a legend.
He plays better angry.
Absolutely.
He sure does.
Anthony Edwards from ER and Goose from Top Gun was one of Spicoli's buddies, as was Eric Stoltz, who we would also see in Memphis Belle and the movie Mask, who he was in with Cher.
Yeah.
Brief appearances by Nicolas Cage, though at that point was Nicholas Coppola.
Correct.
Nephew of Francis Ford Coppola. We saw him. He was worked at the burger place
with a paper hat.
Yeah, with a paper hat. And then blink and you'll miss him. He's at the pep rally with the cheerleaders where they're having paper airplanes thrown at him.
You know, I really like that scene. Not to get off track of our cast. When they're making fun of the cheerleader and the cheerleader stops and says, "Hey, it's embarrassing to get out here and do this. So I'd appreciate a little support."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a moment.
It was. I felt that.
Yeah,
because as an adult, I'm like, yeah, she's absolutely right. But as a kid watching that, it's like, stupid cheerleader.
And I also wondered why there was only 2 cheerleaders.
Well, during the football game, there were more.
But why in the pep rally? There's only 2.
There was only 2 with pep.
Only 2 with pep. They were the peppiest.
They were the peppiest
cheerleaders.
The other ones were going through some shit, and they just needed some time, to deal with that. Well, outside of the pep rally, let's get into the nitty gritty of the scenes that make this movie what it is. And really, I don't think we can talk about the scenes of this movie without starting with the introduction, where we really get to know these characters, the intro montage at the mall, which in my opinion is just a time capsule of quintessential 80s culture. We see the characters in their natural elements. And what I love about this scene, number one, you got the Go-Go's, we got the beat, which, man, what a tone setter. And number 2, there is just so much exposition going on without anyone having to speak a word.
And also so much high-waisted jeans butt shots.
Yeah.
It was everywhere. And it was always down like a line, they 80s movies loved high-waisted jean butt shots.
Mm-hmm.
They really did.
I liked the closing scene of the opening was the shot of the video arcade Missile Command when you lose and the whole thing blows up. And that was like the end of the opening montage. I thought that was pretty cool.
That was neat.
Hey, what were some of your favorite classic arcade games?
Oh. By name, oh man. What was it? Galaga? Was that the one where it was just a little bitty ship?
Yeah,
you had to go back and forth,
Yeah,
scroll back and forth. I loved that one. That one was so much fun.
Space Invaders.
Maybe
Space
that's
Invaders,
the one I was
that's a
thinking
good
of.
one.
Galaga was one too, but I think they were pretty similar.
Okay. I mean, you can't go wrong with Pac-Man either.
Miss Pac-Man, I thought was so much better than the original Pac-Man. I'd love playing Miss Pac-Man.
Oh, it's much quicker too.
Yeah.
Much faster.
Right.
And the bow.
Yeah, it's so cute.
Made the whole thing.
In the cut scenes between the levels.
They tell a story.
It did tell a story.
I'll also throw out Pole Position.
Pole Position's a good one.
Yeah, I enjoyed Pole Position.
I'll always remember the sound it makes when you start.
Beep, 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 beep. And And then usually if you're me driving, within about 3 seconds, it'd be.
All right, back to the movie.
Yeah. But anyway, it really told us a lot. We saw the characters in their natural settings. We saw the characters at work. We got to see who was with who. There was a lot going on in a very short amount of time, set to a very enjoyable bit of music.
And in the 80s culture, just one look at them told you a lot about their personality.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, the nerdy guy, he was wearing a bow tie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, he's an usher at the movie theater, but, who's wears a bow tie in high school? It's the nerdy guy.
Right.
And so just by looking at them, you could assume a great deal about their character. And I thought that set the tone really well, and it gave you a leg up on who those characters were, like you said, before they even said anything.
The course of this movie, it really covers one school year. And some of them are freshmen, some of them are seniors. But over the course of this movie, we follow them from, September-ish to June-ish the following year.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we start off, they're about to enter the school year. And then from there, we transition to the beginning of the school year. And this is where we get to meet some of the teachers at the school, including Mr. Hand. He has some very interesting rules for his classroom.
There will be no eating. E-A-T-I-N-G. No eating in this class.
Now, I don't know why he felt the need to spell eating.
Right.
While he was stealing some kid's Butterfinger.
Right.
Yeah.
Just had to really hammer that home.
And I don't know if you noticed, just moments before that, he pulls a cigarette out of someone's mouth, which felt, I know this was 82, and by the time I was in high school, it was the 90s, but it felt, who's sitting in class with a cigarette in their mouth?
Well, did you see what he did?
He took it out, broke it in half and
then he smelled it to make sure it wasn't pot.
I wonder what he would have done if it was. I think he maybe tucked it in his pocket, saved it for later.
Put it in his pocket with the Butterfinger.
I guess it's just a different time for teachers, right? Because I know that was an extreme. Mr. Hand was an extreme, but I do remember it was in second or third grade. I had a teacher who tied a kid to a chair with a jump rope. And someone actually, when you get to sixth grade and you get to write memories and stuff, next to your name, you have the bigger picture and all that. They actually wrote in when Miss Peterson tied Chad Wilson to the chair with a jump rope. And it was holy cow, she really did that. I forgot all about that. Well, and it was just he was a hyperactive kid, probably had ADHD before you knew anything about ADHD, and she tied him to a chair with a jump rope.
Well, I know this was a different time because I definitely remember when I was in elementary school in the mid 80s, spanking was still a thing, and at least in the elementary school I went to, every teacher had their own paddle, and there were legends that would circulate, just urban legends around so and so and their paddle. We would give the paddles names. You didn't want to mess around with Miss Johnson because she'll pull out Excalibur.
Right. And not only that, but she'll get a running start.
Oh, yeah.
Or how about the teacher who would drill holes in it so it won't move through the air quicker?
Wind resistance.
Yeah. Spanking was a huge threat when I was in school.
And it was, but what I found interesting watching this, there was a moment right as Mr. Hand walks in the room, the very first thing he does is he locks the door.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, again, change of times. Maybe it's because me as a parent, I saw that. I'm like, what the hell? Right. What if there's a fire?
I thought the same thing. Yeah, he locked those kids in his class. And I'm like, well, that's not really cool today.
No, it's not.
I think his priorities are askew. Barring, who was he trying to lock out anyway?
Spicoli.
He didn't even know Spicoli existed at that point.
Not yet, no. I guess anybody who was late.
That's just being derelict in your duties.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it feels like his priorities are wrong. No EATING in class, and apparently you can lock your door and hold your prisoner. But to be a couple minutes late, off to the office.
Hey, bud, what's your problem?
No problem at all. I think you know where the front office is.
You dick!
Which also seemed like a pretty extreme response.
Yeah, Spicoli in that moment, he had to have been pretty heated to call him a dick because he was so laid back about everything else all the time. You know, that must have made him super mad.
But from the classroom, then we also transition to one of the more quintessential scenes from high school life, the cafeteria, where we find Stacy and Linda gathered around the lunch table having a discussion about various different aspects of life, including the fine art of fellatio, which Linda has to demonstrate with a carrot.
What's the big deal?
I never did it.
You've never given a blowjob? Never? Stace, there's nothing to it. It's so easy.
So Linda proceeds to demonstrate using carrots. I didn't really feel like her demonstration skills were convincing at all.
Did you also hear the just complete disappointment in her voice? You've never done it, Stace. Come on, it's easy.
Everybody's doing it.
How could you not have done it by now?
But come to find out, by the end of the movie, it's very plausible that she has also never done it.
Oh yeah, I think she is just a complete phony. I mean, she wants Stacy to think she's really cool, but I'll also throw out, Linda is a senior, Stacy is a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of senior is hanging out with a freshman at lunch?
Yeah, without any other friends around. They're the only two at the table.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's some red flags going in here about Linda and her quote-unquote expertise.
When a guy has an orgasm, how much comes out?
A quart or so.
Orders.
No, I'm just kidding. Just practice.
Now, Linda doesn't actually give a real answer. I mean, she throws out a quart or so, and then when Stacy wants to know more, Linda deflects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just keep practicing.
Just keep practicing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with your carrot. You know, relaxing that muscle and not biting.
As an adult, I don't know. I thought it was kind of cringy.
Absolutely cringy.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, obviously the movie's not made for us at this age.
Right.
You know?
Like,
it was
yeah.
Whenever I was 12, 13, I'm like, oh yeah,
right.
that's amazing, you know. But yeah, watching it now, I'm just like, man, that's perfectly good carrot.
A lot of this movie is relationships, friends giving friends advice, providing that mentoring ear. We definitely find that between Mike and Mark. Mark is in class with Stacy, biology class, and Stacy is at one point playing with. First of all, I have to say, my experience in high school does not match apparently this high school experience, because we never had monkeys in a biology lab. Did you guys have monkeys in your biology room?
No, we had no live animals.
What the hell?
You know, Mr. Oberneuferman had quite a few animals in his class.
That is quite the name. Can you say it one more time?
Oberneuferman.
That is amazing.
He was one of the most amazing teachers I ever had.
He sounds like he would be.
Science teacher.
He would have to be with.
We dissected a shark.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like a baby shark?
Yeah, it was a baby
shark.
No. I stepped right into that one, didn't I?
Sorry.
Do you think that...
Anyway, so there's a biology room. Mark, Stacy are there, as is a pet monkey. Now, at many points in this film, I gotta wonder whether it's intentional or not. But Mark kind of falls in love in his mind while Stacy is playing with a monkey. Like, ooh, Stacy, you want to pet my monkey? It's almost like what I feel like is going through his mind.
There is a ton of those innuendos throughout this entire movie. If you pay attention and you look, there is so many sexual references and visual references that aren't even spoken.
Yeah.
It's awfully amazing.
But I feel so oblivious because I missed like every single one of these.
But we'll bring up more. But Mark,
point them out to me.
Mark, being the inexperienced youth that he is, goes to his friend Mike Damone for advice. Confesses that I'm in love, and Mike has to break down to him And he presents, what he sees as the attitude.
That's the attitude.
The attitude?
Yeah, the attitude dictates that you don't care whether she comes, stays, lays, or prays.
Mike has, definitely seems to want to present himself like he is an expert. And so I got to ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, just how full of shit is Damone?
11.
Yeah, I'd say 11 as well. He's that guy in high school who you just wish would get beat up.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was just praying for it the whole time. Yeah. I've seen this movie before. I know he doesn't, but I was just like, maybe this time it'll be different.
Right.
Well, regardless of the quality of Mike's consultation, it does result in Mark and Stacy going on a date. And whether you consider this date to be extremely relatable or extremely cringe is up to you. But I got to say, it's probably one of the more painfully awkward moments, certainly within the movie. Just a few quick thoughts. Of all the options available for this dinner, Mark takes her to a German restaurant. Do either of you think that's an odd choice?
Oh, German food's delightful.
Well, I'm sure, but
you've got your goulashes, you've got your wursts, you've got your knockwurst, you've got your schnitzel, and your spatzels.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I enjoy a wurst and a schnitzel as much as anybody. Even the occasional bit of kraut when the mood strikes. But it doesn't really feel like first date food.
What did Stacy order?
She will have the knockwurst. And you? I'll have the same.
Knockwurst for everybody.
Knockwurst for everyone. A round of knockwurst.
A giant freaking sausage.
At least it wasn't a carrot.
So yeah, another instance where they squeeze in fairly phallic choices.
Yeah, a little innuendo.
A little bit, because hey, what do you want on your first date on the plate? I'll have a giant sausage.
And fast forward into the date, and she was asking for another round of knockwurst.
Yeah. Well, it's also I gotta ask what's up with those chairs and the menus? Because number one, the chairs just seem huge. The menus are huge. They look like Lily Tomlin in one of those Edith Ann sketches.
And that's all I've got to say about that.
Yeah.
So this is actually one of the things that I thought that they did on purpose to really set that scene of making them look like little kids.
They totally do.
Like, and I thought it was really neat the way that they shot it. And like, even the people in the background as adults filled their chairs up way more than they did. And they were probably smaller chairs, but they just looked so tiny, and it really put them into perspective as kids.
Following that theme of immaturity, after they've had their dinner, or actually, for those who haven't seen the movie, there's an embarrassing moment. Mark realizes he doesn't have his wallet. Mike eventually comes, saves the day after they've probably drank enough Cokes to
float away.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Is it just me, or did you notice whenever he walked in to the table, almost immediately, Stacy's given him a little bit of the CFMs, the come fuck me eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Like she was like, oh, I'm a date with this guy, but maybe this is the guy I want to be. I mean, the seed was planted like right off the bat.
But do you think that with her, the CFM eyes, do you think that was written intentionally because of the way that she was introduced to sex from the 26-year-old guy?
And Justin, you brought up something we should probably talk about that kind of missed earlier in the discussion. Stacy's first sexual experience is also in this movie, not with either Mark or Mike, but is another guy, also with a horrible name, Ron Johnson.
Ron Johnson.
Ron who?
Ron Johnson.
Another innuendo.
Imagine that.
The stereo salesman.
The only other notable thing I had a note on this, and it is the only appearance by a parent in the whole movie.
I wrote that down as well. I didn't know that you wrote it in your notes, but that was something that I realized after I watched it today.
Stacy's mom says, tucks her in, kisses her goodnight, walks away. Stacy sneaks out. And God, this scene just gave me so much anxiety. Now as a growing up with a daughter of my own, just seeing her, sneak out to hook up with Ron Johnson, and this 26-year-old stereo salesman takes her to a baseball dugout to do the deed.
Why?
And what I love is like they sit down. You could tell she's like physically exerting, signs that she's cold. He takes his jacket, or she's like, "That's a really nice jacket," and he takes it off. She's like, "Yeah, I'm really warm."
And instead of putting it on her, he puts it
off to the side,
next to him.
and then they commence the doing of it.
At 26 years old, how do you not have a better place to go than a little league dugout?
Yep.
26. Do you don't have an apartment?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
You have nowhere else you could go unless he's not 26, and he's lying about that too.
That's true. Maybe he's even older. I don't know. Maybe he's married.
I mean, maybe Ron Douchey, or maybe Ron Johnson is as douchey as what his name actually sounds like, and just really enjoys banging chicks on splintery wood benches.
I guess.
I thought the scene was very off-putting.
Yeah,
I kind of get what they're going at. You have this young woman, this girl who is a freshman in high school. She thinks has to act a certain way because, that's what high schoolers do.
Mm-hmm.
But she was on a mission to end her virginity, and it just so happened to be with a 26-year-old. And yeah, that was gross.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Fast forward back to where we were talking about before. Her first date with Mark. They have their weird experience at the German restaurant. They have their knockwurst, and then they go back to Stacy's house where he's just dropping her off. And she invites him in and makes the odd choice to go change into a bathrobe.
Yeah, she asks him to unzip her dress.
Yeah, so she can go get more comfortable. And then I feel like there's a clash between her forwardness, but also her naivete, and that she is wearing nothing but a bathrobe, and having him in her bedroom, and then wants to look at old photo albums and point out, childhood photos of her and her brother. It's like this is this girl who wants to make moves she's not ready for, but at the same time is clinging to something else.
Right.
Yeah. She was trying to do an adult deed while acting very childish. And that's the coming of age. I think there's a point in life where we've all been stuck in that middle area where I want to act like an adult. Look at all the fun adults have. But I'm still a kid.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, now that you mention that, like just the innocence of, here's like, it's probably what she really wanted to be doing versus what she thought that she had to be doing, and that's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah.
But they end up kissing.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark doesn't respond well. And basically he's like, I just remembered my sister really cares about her car and I got to get back. And basically runs out of there like his pants are on fire.
I feel bad for him. I really do. And I'm going to let you know on something here. I sympathize with him because sadly I see a lot of myself in high school as Mark.
Oh, I'm with you.
So oblivious to any advance that any female ever came onto me. Like it was just like no clue at any time that anybody was ever flirting with me, had any interest in me whatsoever. And I probably seemed like the biggest asshole by just dismissing whatever was going on at that time. But I just had no clue.
Let me refer to my notes where I put down, I never found girls in high school that easy.
Both characters go off to do, they're kind of both, Monday morning quarterbacking. Linda with Stacy, Mark with Mike. And it all comes back together to kick off one of the more iconic scenes of the movie, probably definitely the most watched scenes in the movie, the pool scene. And which I think we have ultimately a scene within a scene within a scene in the pool scene. Scene number 1, we have Mike and Mark showing up uninvited to the pool. Scene 2, we have Brad fantasizing about Linda. And scene 3, Linda catching Brad in the act. So let's break these down one at a time. I want to start off with scene 1 of the pool scene. Mike and Mark just showing up at a pool, already dressed in their pool, their swimwear, uninvited. Now, maybe it's just me, and again, maybe it's just a changing of the times. It feels so weird to see someone just show up at someone's house uninvited.
Right.
Oh, yeah, they should have at least texted. No, and to clarify, so the pool is at Stacy's house, her parents' house. They have a pool in the backyard, and that is the said pool. So, is it one of those things where you drive by and you see somebody's car there, and you're like, oh, they must be here. Let's go. But it wouldn't have been that because they were already dressed for the pool. So it was a conscious decision to, let's crash her house and maybe we can swim in her pool.
I had that with friends in high school.
Yeah, you had a pool.
Guy friends would just show up, like unannounced. They'd just be at your house, But never would I have. I don't think I ever just showed up to a girlfriend's house.
It's a very forward move.
It really is.
Very presumptuous.
Well, that's Mike. Mike's very presumptuous. And we know that he probably talked Mark into doing that.
Absolutely.
Because Mark showed up.
He's still talking him into it as they're walking up to the gate.
Yeah.
But once they're in, I got to say, Mike shows again his true colors of being a douche and almost immediately pushes Mark into the pool.
Yep.
The first thing that went through my head when he pushed him in the pool? Like, oh my God, his cell phone's going to get wet.
I feel like the seeds are being planted here. Like Mike is planting the seeds right in front of his friend with Stacy.
I mean, it started at the dinner scene.
It started the dinner scene. It definitely continues here. And I feel like that's why he's pushing so hard Mark to go see Stacy, because he wants to see Stacy.
He does.
And right off the bat has to display his alphaness by pushing Mark into the pool. And there's a moment where and I had to actually went back and watch this multiple times to make sure I saw what I thought I saw. Whenever later in the scene, whenever Linda gets out of the pool, goes off to look for a Q-tip, you see, Mike Damone and Stacy break right up on him in the pool wearing his sunglasses. I'm like, dang.
Yeah,
today friend is in the pool.
Today was the first time I noticed that. All the times that I've watched this movie, that was the first time I saw that. And and Ashley had pointed out to me too. She's like, is that Rat? And I was like, no, that's Mike. That's Damone. And she's wearing his sunglasses. She's in his lap. And Rat is nowhere to be found.
No.
He's not in the scene at all. You can't hear him. He's not splashing around.
He's probably doing his math homework somewhere.
He was nowhere in the scene whatsoever.
I don't know. Maybe she'd already moved on. And she was looking for her next conquest because she knew that Mark was not going to be able to be had.
That could be. Awful to do it right in front of him, though.
Yeah.
That's pretty low.
Especially with his buddy knowing how much he likes her.
Yeah. He's low.
Yeah. He's not a buddy.
No, not a buddy at all.
All right, so moving on to the second scene within the scene. Probably everyone's favorite scene. The fantasy scene. And there was one thing, again, I never picked up on previously. But this time, for some reason, despite everything else that I could have paid attention to, the thing that stood out to most to me is, why is Brad wearing a suit in his own fantasy?
Because I guarantee you it's because he walked past that pool wearing his Captain Hook fish and chips uniform and just felt so stupid that in his own fantasy, he's this big shot wearing a suit, big money boy, and he's got the girl and she's topless and she's wet. She's excited to have him.
I'm
wearing a suit.
Hearing you say that, I'm excited. It is the defining moment of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's the scene that every young man who's seen it remembers for two good reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's an iconic movie moment.
Do you feel like having a fantasy sequence added to the movie? I mean, why did we need to have a dream sequence here?
I don't know if it was just, teenage boy kind of thing, like it's just another, like masturbation is just another symptom of being a teenage boy, or if it was just thrown in for the comedy of it. Like the fantasy part obviously was for the sex appeal, but like what happens afterwards is for the comedy of it. I don't know if it was just a comedic gag that they threw in, or if it had any kind of deeper relevance to it whatsoever.
I thought the fantasy was very representative of what we'd all, not exactly what we would fantasize in that situation, but kind of.
Oh, I think it's pretty straight up in line with what I would have fantasized in that moment. I don't think I would have wore a suit. Always hated suits.
You know what it also reminded me of? Remember Christmas Vacation?
Yeah.
About the pool, and he looks out the window and he fantasizes about the pool and the woman on the diving board.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty much the same scenario.
Sure.
And I think it goes to show that no matter what age you are, that fantasy is alive and well in all of us.
I mean, even the same color swimsuit.
Okay, but to draw the difference here.
Mm-hmm.
In Christmas Vacation, he is fantasizing about a grown woman. In this case, fantasizing about a teenage girl. This is a actress of age, fully capable of making that choice, but she's portraying a character who presumably is under the age of 18. She's still in high school. Does that change your perception of that scene?
The fact that he also was in high school and they were of similar ages helps me tolerate it more.
Mm-hmm.
What makes me uncomfortable is viewing that as a grown man not being 18 and being aroused by it.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I used to be. Seeing it yesterday, again, as an adult, it didn't quite have the same punch as I remembered. Because of that, exactly. Because, here's this teenage girl and I'm a grown man. There's something wrong with me if I find this exhilarating.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was 10, it sure was.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely didn't gawk at it the same way I did at 12, 13 years old.
Oh yeah, wasn't wearing out the tracking on the VHS tape.
No, and I'm proud of myself. I was alone when I watched this last night, and I did not rewind the scene. No, I didn't. I just watched it for what it was worth, and it didn't have the same punch. And I think that's because, man, I can't do that and feel this way about a high school girl being a grown ass man.
So this then leads to, as we've alluded to, the third scene within the scene. Brad in the bathroom doing what teenage boys do when certain things are on their mind. When, unfortunately, after jumping to the pool, Linda has to run inside.
Stacy? Do you have any Q-tips? I've got water in my ears. I don't know. Check in the house.
Not getting into the recommended use of Q-tips. She has to go inside, goes to the bathroom, opens the door, finds Brad, presumably in mid-stroke, and Brad is incredibly embarrassed.
Does anybody knock anymore?
First question, he's concerned about people knocking anymore. How many times has this happened to Brad?
Oh, poor Brad. I'm assuming probably pretty often. If you say anymore, like he could have just said, "Doesn't anybody knock?"
Yeah,
like that would have. Yeah, he's alluding to this happens to him on a regular basis.
Well, she walks up and she's behind him. I watched that scene thinking, I wonder how much she saw.
Right. How does she even know what he was doing?
Right.
I mean, she could, I guess, assume what he was doing. based on the motion from his arm from behind. But
well, and she never brought it back up. I thought maybe it would be a topic that was going to come back up in the movie, or she would tease Stacy about, what she saw her brother doing. It almost makes me think that she didn't quite realize what was going on, even though she thinks she's this sexual entrepreneur, and she has made all that up, and she doesn't even know enough to know what he was doing.
Yeah.
I think Linda had a crush on Brad.
Really?
I do. So whenever Brad comes into the scene wearing his whole pirate getup, walks in and Stacy's like, it's just my friends Mike and Mark, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, oh, whatever, and goes inside, be quiet because I got work to do.
He sure did have work to do.
Yeah, he was working it.
Linda makes the comment, God, he hardly even talks anymore. Now, my sister had friends. I don't think anyone gave two shits about me.
I'm right there with you. I had an older sister, and it was the same way. Yeah.
And Brian, you had a sister. Do you think any of your sister's friends would have cared about how you were feeling?
I dated a few of them.
So apparently some of them cared about how you felt.
And boy, did it piss my sister off.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet it did.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just play devil's advocate and say maybe she did have a little thing for Brad. Maybe, as we've alluded to, Doug was just her Canadian girlfriend. And that Doug, the older airline executive who didn't come to town for her graduation, and therefore she had to break up with him in a letter. Maybe he didn't actually exist, and maybe she was actually pining for Brad. He was a little defeated. He was a little down on the dauber.
Maybe she didn't even have water in her ear, and she needed to get it out with that Q-tip. She just wanted to go inside so she could talk to Brad.
It seemed like a very quick reaction. Like, I'm just been sitting here in the diving board, feeling all sad for myself because you're hanging out with your two dude friends, and I don't want to be the fourth wheel. I'm just going to go dive in the pool, and almost immediately, comes out of the pool. It's like, Stacy, where are the Q-tips?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you didn't even try. You didn't try to shake that out.
So she sat on the diving board to think of a quick excuse to get inside the house. Okay, yeah, I get where you're going with that.
I think that would have been a real fun subplot if they'd have chased that theme. I think that would have added to the movie.
I think we sleuthed it.
Yes. The last thing I'm going to say, all teenage boys understand that the first rule of masturbation is you don't talk about masturbation, but the second rule of masturbation, lock the door, Brad.
Absolutely.
Lock the door.
Absolutely. I mean, Bush League, like, what's the matter with you? Lock the door.
So later on, we go on, as we alluded to, Stacy continues with her pattern of CFMs with Mike Damone. Goes to school, starts writing Stacy and Mike Damone in her notebook, and then basically, lures him back to their house. It's really cool. You have a pool, and she's like, "You want to go swimming?" And he's like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And so then he's like, "Well, Brad's got swim trunks out in the changing room," and she's like, "Oh, let's go." And so then they go out to the swimming pool and go into the changing room, and she's like, "Take your clothes off," and he's like, "You first." And then they get naked, and then they do it. And
briefly,
it lasts maybe 2-3 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Dude's a 2-pump chump.
That was a quickie.
It just solidified the all yak, no shack kind of attitude from him. The attitude versus reality.
Yeah, and this is where my theory of that Mike Damone was a virgin.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
This whole like talk thing, like none of it ever worked.
Dude was a serious poser.
Yeah. Right.
He was a poser.
Yeah. And then the one time he gets the opportunity, he just shows his true colors. He had no experience. He wasn't good at it. He never was. He never did it.
If he was going over for that, the Broad Code tells you what to do. You got to take the bullet out of the chamber.
He should have pulled a Brad, but locked the door.
That's right. He should have pulled a Brad before he went over to Stacy's house.
Oh, he could have done it at Stacy's house and pulled to Linda and said, "Hey, I got some water in my ear. Can you got any Q-tips? Go rub out the quick one and then go change your clothes."
But yeah, I think this was a real moment that showed, because he right afterwards he left like he was embarrassed.
Yeah, and
I showed it. I think it showed some real vulnerability finally in that douchebag of a character.
Well, and then after that, going back to school, he is avoiding Stacy like the plague, and until eventually she catches up with him, and they have this conversation.
I just want you to know that I'm pregnant.
How do you know it's mine? I mean, we only did it once.
I haven't been with anybody else. I know it's yours.
Jesus. I mean, it was your idea. You wanted to do it. You wanted it more than I did.
No. Take that back.
Couple things here. Number one, I love the no. Take that back. Like she is offended. But the other part, he finds out that she's pregnant, and his immediate defense for some reason is that you wanted it more than me. I mean, what the hell, dude?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it just goes back to the slime ball he is.
Total slime ball. No, beyond the fact he has no game, he has just no spine, and he's just a piece of shit.
I cannot imagine hearing any scarier words than that when you're a boy in high school.
Yeah.
Right.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I would have done if I would have ever heard that in high school.
Right.
I don't think I would have reacted the same way he did.
Oh, heck no. We're good people.
Right.
Or we were good people. Maybe we weren't.
Probably wasn't that great.
No, not that, but we weren't that bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely wasn't that bad.
The solution, they both have come to the conclusion almost immediately to get an abortion. After some interplay about how it's weird, a free clinic abortion should cost $150, they decide to split the cost, and $75 in a ride, but Mike ends up, shocker, doesn't show up. But who comes to save the day? Brad.
Her brother.
Her brother.
Brad.
Her big brother. Doing a solid.
And at first doesn't even know. Thinks he's taking her bowling. But then, as he's driving away, in the rear view, catches sight of his sister running across the street, and he cares enough, despite the fact he's always seemed like kind of just a bossy older brother up to this point. In this moment, he cares enough to actually wonder what's going on, and he circles back and is there for her when she needs him. And her first response, her question is like, "Are you not going to tell mom and dad, are you?" And he's like, "No." Like he wouldn't even dreamt of it. Like
right.
he in this moment. Whatever you might have thought about Brad prior to this, I think he was as stand-up dude as you can be.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he really channeled Big Brother at that point,
So I had an issue with that whole scene.
Okay.
I thought everybody was very flippant about what she just went through. And it started with the whole discharge process when she was being released from the clinic. The nurse was and I'm sure that nurse, that's what that clinic does, and they do that all the time. And then she goes to discharge her and says, "Oh, I can't let you leave without a ride." And she says, "Oh, my boyfriend's downstairs," not knowing her brother was down there.
Right.
And the nurse is just like, "Oh, okay." But I thought the whole conversation prior to about the money, and I thought the conversation immediately after, although it was fairly heartfelt with the big brother being a big brother, that is a very heavy action to not just to undergo physically, but also emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought it was treated very flippantly.
They definitely were very matter of fact. They didn't add a lot of extra emotional layers on top, which I think really made that scene and this depiction of abortion really stand out. I mean, you look at other movies that tackled the abortion prior to it. It was always definitely dramatized. It was always very emotional. It was either that or honestly just implied or avoided entirely or addressed in extremely adult-oriented kind of ways. It was not touched really on in teen-centric movies.
And I thought they had a real moment where they could have at least tied into something. The very next scene, they go on a field trip to the hospital, the biology class. And the first place they go is to the nursery.
Yeah.
And they're looking through the windows at all the newborn babies. And I thought, okay, here is where we're going to get the moment or the conversation or just maybe the emotion of what had just happened. But there was nothing.
Yeah. And it could have been. And I wonder whether that would have been. Because honestly, that whole trip to the hospital, other than to see Mr. Vargas play with organs down in the morgue, seemed to have no purpose whatsoever. So maybe that was an intention, and maybe something was cut in editing, or maybe it was for some reason. I don't know. But that may have been the plan.
What a heavy scene for coming of age, funny, high school teeny bop movie.
But here's the other thing that stands out about this. This is not the climax of the movie.
No.
We're about midway through the movie.
Right.
This, in any other movie, would have been the storyline.
Correct.
This is a subplot.
They could have just done something so little.
Yeah.
So mild. They could have shown, they could have cut to Stacy sitting on her bed hugging a pillow, not even crying, but just like she's thinking about what had just happened.
Mm-hmm.
Or, have that extra 2 or 3 sentence conversation about, when they decide to do it. It's so matter of fact. It was just kind of, yeah, this is what we do. We did. All right, let's move on.
All right. Well, on that note, let's move on and talk about something. Honestly, what I feel like was my favorite part of the film.
Okay.
And as I alluded to, I think Brad is one of the strongest characters in the movie. He has an arc. And it's not necessarily one specific scene. But if you see, one of the things this film really follows along is just a series of disastrous work experiences for Brad. Brad starts the movie off just riding high. He feels like he's on top of the world. 6 more payments. He's practicing his breakup speech in front of the big hairy pussy mirror. Something else that gets changed in cable TV version. Then it just kind of spins out of control.
It says 100% guaranteed, you moron.
Mister, if you don't shut up, I'm going to kick 100% of your ass.
I got to ask, though, did you happen to notice the sign that's behind Brad while he's at the checkout and he's having this interaction with the angry customer? It says, "Try our 100% guaranteed breakfast." What are they actually guaranteeing? That it's just actually breakfast?
I guarantee you this is breakfast.
You that's a pancake. Oh.
I think the lawyers could have had a field day with that.
Yeah. So I think Brad's 100% in the right here. That guy is 100% of a douchebag, and he should get 100% of his ass kicked.
Well, did you see? He ate most of the breakfast.
Yeah, he did.
He only decided to take it back for a refund with like 3 bites left.
Exactly.
If it was that bad, you wouldn't have eaten it.
It couldn't have been that bad.
Did either of you work in fast food when you were in high school?
Thank God. Thank God, no.
Yeah, I worked. My first job actually was Dairy Queen.
My first job was McDonald's.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember vividly, we on Sunday evenings were the worst shift to work.
Absolutely.
Because there was one church, I don't know what denomination it was, and honestly probably doesn't matter, that would get out and suddenly we would be flooded.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one family in particular we all came to hate. There was a very, very, very large gentleman who had very, very small glasses that were like held on his head by those croquis, those like bands. And so which basically formed like this permanent wedge in the back of his head and it would be tightened up. And then he had his wife who had tattooed makeup that looked just like Mimi Bobek on the Drew Carey show, but permanently tattooed on her face.
That's amazing.
And they had multiple kids who I didn't know then because I just wasn't old enough and didn't have life experience to say it. But now as an older adult, I'm like 99% sure they were pretty far down the spectrum that would just run wild. And I don't know how many times I was working the counter when this family came in. They'd make their giant order of food. And sometimes, things take a little time. This guy, not once, not twice, but 3 times, threw French fries at me.
It's amazing how angry.
Oh,
people
so
get
angry
about food.
So angry. And he would, the first time he just threw them down like, these fries are cold. The second time, which was multiple weeks later, he threw them down and again said, these fries are cold. Third time, he threw them smack into my chest. And this time, and this is what I'll remember more than being struck by a container full of fried potatoes, his choice of words, these potatoes are cold.
Them taters.
Yeah.
What did you do in response?
I'm like, I called over my manager, Randy, and let him deal with it because he got paid a lot more than me. He can deal with the assholes.
Oh, that's the correct move right there.
Yeah. And Randy was an asshole too, so they could speak their own language.
So Brad is where I feel like there's kind of a pretty big hole to how this even happened, right? Because like you said, he's riding high. He's, independent, and he's calls himself like single and successful.
Yeah.
And, he's going to take some time. It's a senior year, and he's going to have all these great experiences as a single successful guy.
Look, I'm a senior now. I'm a single successful guy. And I've got to be fair to myself.
He's got to be fair to himself.
Absolutely should be fair to yourself, Brad.
He sounds happy.
Yeah.
Like things are great. He just got his buddy a job.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was wiping big hairy pussy off the mirror, and then Arnold has to pee, so he goes and covers him.
I hope you had a hell of a piss, Arnold.
He did, like he got out of the whole thing. But so, on the wall, he is employee of the month.
Yeah.
Like it's right there. That's him. That's Brad. The dusty mustache manager, he knows this is out of character for Brad.
Yeah.
So if he's riding so high, why does he snap so quickly? That's so out of character.
I think he's just a very tightly wound person, and he's convinced himself that he's riding high. Part of it, I think, is also he is so used to grown-ups kissing his butt. Tell him how great he is. Brad, you're the smartest. Brad, you're the best employee. Brad, everything is great. Brad, we want you to work for us. Brad, you're going to be a superstar. Brad, this and that and this and that. He is, and then suddenly there's this new adult standing here saying, you're a bad employee. You're giving me bad service. You're terrible. And his ego can't handle it. And yeah, right. I think he snaps.
He does, but I just didn't see why this one guy made everything fall apart,
I think that there's a moment we see before Brad snaps that might give us a little bit more of a clue. The way he acts, the way he talks, you'd think he's riding high. But would someone who's riding high, who is your star employee, would you send him into the bathroom to scrub off big hairy pussy from a mirror?
So maybe Brad wasn't really. Well, no, he had the employee of the month. Maybe that was fake too.
But maybe
that was a fantasy.
Maybe that was a special award.
Best at wiping things off the mirror.
Now, did he before that? He was talking about he's going to break up with his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
He owes it to himself to be free. And then at the school assembly, the
girlfriend
turns the table.
That was after.
That was after.
Yeah, it was
that.
after.
Yeah.
So it's part of the downward spiral. So that's not what could have caused him to snap.
Mm-hmm. And that I thought was funny too, because after he got fired, he's like, I really need you right now.
Right. It was a total 180 from his, self-inflating.
Right.
I'm the man.
Right. Exactly. Oh, I need a single successful guy. Need my freedom.
I
need you so bad.
You know what's interesting? I did that when I was a senior. I had a girlfriend.
Yeah.
For high school, it was a long time we were together. And then after the start of my senior season, I broke up with her because I needed to be free.
You're a single successful guy.
I was.
You had wild oats.
You only had six more payments to go.
Six more payments.
Right. I kind of identified with that because is that a thing? And seeing that in this movie made me feel as though, yeah, that's a thing.
I thought, now looking back on it, like my senior year, I wish I would have been single. not to like try to hook up with a bunch of different girls or anything, but just to like now looking back on it, I would have had more fun my senior year if I would have been hanging out with my guy friends.
Oh yeah.
And doing things with them instead.
Because what I've also come to learn as an adult, high school girls are pretty much the worst.
Well, you know, I don't know if they're the worst. Let me zoom to today. I have a son. He's a senior in high school. And there's this friend of his who's a girl. And he made a comment to me the other day. And I'm like, dude, you're starting to get it. He said, Dad, having a girlfriend is really expensive. Looking back, you know, I remember saying stupid stuff to my girl, like, if we were older, I'd ask you to marry me. I mean, seriously,
Yeah,
right? It was terrible.
I think we all did that.
It was. I mean, I'm so embarrassed about that kind of stuff. It
Well,
was,
and part of it's just that complete lack of life experience. You don't have enough scope to actually understand what is and what isn't. And that
is so true.
We are dealing with that already with my 11, almost 12-year-old daughter. I mean, she's already, has her first boyfriend, talked about but I love him.
No, you don't.
Like, no, you don't. No, you don't.
You don't know what love is.
You know nothing.
And you're right. They do know nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we digress.
We do. And after his burger-fueled, failures, Brad's descent into madness continues. Going over to the seafood place where he has to wear the pirate uniform, which does not go well for him.
That was a sweet uni though.
Nice.
The hat that was awesome.
As we've before mentioned, the embarrassment of having to wear that in front of your sisters and her friends and in their pool. And then, the straw that breaks the camel's back, getting sent to on a delivery to the boys at IBM.
What a name drop, like what a name drop.
Yep.
California company.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is the boys over at IBM.
Yeah. Send this over to the boys at IBM and insistent that he has to wear the uniform, and just happens to end up, sitting at a stoplight next to Nancy Wilson from Heart. My favorite part, though, is how Brad apparently, even before this moment, just seems to be helping himself to the customer's food. Here's a fry, have a drink, totally nonchalant about just eating someone else's food.
Uh-huh. Yeah, he was losing it.
And then after the embarrassment at the stoplight, it gives just the giant middle finger and just throws everything out the window as he drives. Never mind the littering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Damn the man at that point, right?
But now he is truly free. Like before, he talked about being free of Lisa, but now he is young, single, and free.
And unemployed.
Right.
And unemployed.
Yep.
Yeah.
How's he going to make those 6 payments?
Well, that was at the beginning of the movie, right? He was talking about 6 payments. And this is when he snaps is many months later. I think that car is paid off.
He should have had it paid off by then. He should have.
And I would think his pirate uniform would help him get all the booty. I've been sitting on that one for a minute.
Oh, yes.
So a lot of this film it really leans hard into relationships. We've had here the relationship that we've talked about between Stacy and Mike, Stacy and Mark, Stacy and Linda, Stacy and Brad,
Stacy and everybody,
Stacy and everybody. The relationship that I think is most deserving of attention, though, is Spicoli and Mr. Hand.
I've been thinking about this, Mr. Hand. If I'm here and you're here, doesn't that make it our time?
I mean, I think it's a fair question.
I think it's a fair question too, and I think so. I love their relationship. I think that this is like we kind of talked about earlier, that Mr. Hand is so strict and he's not used to anybody sticking up to him. Like everybody's kissing his ass throughout, like all the other kids are just taking it and, nobody's giving anything back. And Spicoli's one that stands up to him.
Yeah. I think he's the only one who challenged Mr. Hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a level of respect Mr. Hand has for Spicoli for doing that.
I agree. Yeah.
You know, and some of the great moments, though, right off the bat, and we talked about when Spicoli's late to class. How can you not love the pizza delivery?
That's my favorite part.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
I mean, Spicoli has a pizza delivered to class.
And I love Mr. Hand's response.
Mr. Hand on dance night shows up to Mr. Spicoli's class, or Mr. Spicoli's class, shows up to Spicoli's house and says, I've estimated you've wasted this much of my time. I'm going to basically take this much time back. And whips out a textbook and starts going through history and Jefferson and Cuba and all kinds of other stuff. And I thought, man, ballsy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, who knows what happens when a teacher shows up to a kid's house, you know? Like,
oh, nothing good happens when that happens. And how rare is it to see a teacher in the wild?
Right.
You know?
Never.
Oh, it's so weird
to see a teacher not at school.
Mm-hmm.
But then the teacher's at your house.
Oh yeah, that's
when
in your bedroom.
Yeah,
I'm so wasted.
When you're really wasted. I mean, he was moments away from smacking himself in the head with a pair of Vans.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Another piece of little innuendo, not sexual this time. But when he says he's so wasted, and then it cuts to his buddy who he's talking to on the phone, who's sitting atop a toilet. So Spicoli's so wasted, and his buddy is high on pot. I don't think that's a coincidence. There's little things like that all throughout this film.
You know, one of the best things, though, about the interplay here is that there is what feels like a very natural tension. And I think in this case, there's a very real tension that came through. As we talked about at the beginning, Sean Penn took a very method approach to Spicoli and spent a lot of time, like all the time on set, in the Spicoli role.
Fun fact. Sean Penn went out and learned how to surf before the movie was shot. After reading the script, he thought it was important. If he was going to play a stoner surfer dude, he better learn how to surf. And he did.
Even though they didn't show him surfing once.
They did. Once.
In a fantasy scene.
Was that actually, like, supposed to be him?
It was actually a stunt double. But it was supposed to be him, yes.
Okay. I just, like, I knew it was the dream sequence, and I didn't really put it together that was him. You know, I don't know. That was a weird one.
But on one hand, you had Sean Penn's method acting. On the other hand, you had Ray Walston, who played Mr. Hand. Ray Walston, a very old school actor. No patience for the method school. No patience for Sean Penn being in Spicoli all the time. And you really feel like that disgust definitely came through.
Hey, you could feel it.
What are you people? On dope?
I thought the tension between the two characters was very palpable. And I think you're right. I think it bled more from off screen than on screen.
All right. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Is there anything else, any key other moments that kind of stood out to you guys that you want to toss in?
The dance at the end of the movie.
I think they called it the graduation dance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I had a couple observations there. Number one, I never had a school dance where they had a live band.
I didn't either.
Though it is a trope that you often see in 80s movies.
Oh, for sure.
I had the opportunity once. My freshman year of high school, I was on student council. And we had the opportunity to get a live band that did covers. And the song that, like, the teacher that was in charge of student council, she played a Green Day song. And it was so bad that we were like, no, get a DJ. Like, we're not going to do that. That was it. That was it. The closest I ever got to a live band at a dance.
And my second observation at that dance was the dancing.
Oh, it was out of control.
I mean, granted, early 80s dance moves were terrible. Absolutely terrible. But I don't think they were as terrible as they were in this film.
They were They were off the wall for sure.
And what I always love about those kind of movies, those scenes, a lot of times they have no idea what the actual song is going to be used, because the songs oftentimes aren't finalized until post-production.
Yeah.
They're bouncing around. And so, a lot of times we see those dance scenes, they're not even close to matching the soundtrack.
Speaking of soundtrack.
Yeah.
I thought the soundtrack to this movie is fantastic.
Oh, it's hard to beat it.
Nice segue. You talked about the very first song at the intro of the movie. We Got the Beat by the Go-Go's.
Mm-hmm.
We've got I'm All Right by Kenny Loggins. You've got Somebody's Baby, Jackson Browne. You've got the Cars, the Beach Boys, Jimmy Buffett, the Suburbs, Glenn Frey. The Flirts. I mean, there are a lot of neat bands on the soundtrack that a lot of them were just kind of getting started. And this soundtrack of this movie that became so popular kind of vaulted them into, pop stardom.
I mean, it's definitely 100% 80s. You know what I mean? Like, it is just full of 80s fun. Every song that you can think of, if you think of 80s, every single song that's on this soundtrack is what you think of when you think of 80s.
Was there anything else that stood out to either one of you about, camera work, shots? Typically I find if you don't notice these kinds of things, then they probably did a good job.
Yeah, I think you can lump that in as far as audio and visual. There was nothing that stood out that was just like god awful. Mm-hmm. Camera work was the same. There was nothing that was like extraordinary that I was like, oh, that's a really cool shot. But there was also nothing that was distracting that took away from the story as well.
I thought there was one shot that was kind of weak.
Yeah.
And that was when Spicoli was driving Forrest Whitaker's car.
Mm-hmm.
And when they crashed.
My brother's gonna kill us. He's gonna kill us. He's gonna kill you, and he's gonna kill me. He's gonna kill us.
Hey, man, just be glad I had fast reflexes.
My brother's gonna shit.
Make up your mind, dude. Is he gonna shit or is he gonna kill us?
There weren't too many throwaway scenes in the movie, but I thought that was one.
I thought that the only thing that it did was it kind of led up. It fueled the legend of Jefferson. Because Forrest Whitaker, I mean, he's only in a few scenes here and there, but honestly, he's such a big presence. And the character he plays, Jefferson, is built up. I didn't even know he lived here. I thought he just flew in for games. He is. So I think that kind of added in to help with that part of the story. But yeah, I mean, for a scene, especially now looking back, how things age, having people minors driving around in a sports car, clearly under the influence of something, not the best avenue for storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And getting away with it.
Getting away with it by inspiring the person whose car they destroyed to inspire them to become a raging lunatic on the football field. Assassinate Lincoln. Also, not sure if that aged very well.
That was funny. I enjoyed that part.
Yeah.
Some of the random stories that made it into this film. Like, we were young, aspiring filmmakers at one point, and we wrote scripts.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we would write things that we just thought were really funny, but didn't make any sense to the story whatsoever. And they would just kind of get thrown in. Yeah. And even if it didn't make sense, it still made it in because it gave us a laugh. And I wonder how many of these side stories were done that way.
I definitely think the Jefferson plotline, Kill Lincoln, definitely probably got thrown in. Although that probably is to me less than a couple others. My number one, just thrown in just for the joy of, and because I can, was the Spicoli surf fantasy. I honestly don't love the fact that there are not one but two dream sequences in this movie. Number one, Spicoli, at least in chronological order as far as the runtime of the film, is Spicoli's surf sequence. Number two, Brad's fantasizing of Linda coming out of the pool.
Mm-hmm.
For a film that's supposed to be built upon the idea of a largely or a somewhat realistic narrative, realistic interactions, realistic this, realistic choices, realistic all that, to have two different points where we just go off into fantasy land feels disingenuous.
Yeah.
And it feels like a cop-out just so they could do something that didn't fit into the storyline.
Yeah. Somebody had an idea and they wanted it in there, and so they wrote it in, and it was like, that's fine.
And the Jefferson part, I think it could very well be that someone came and was like, oh, it'd be really cool if Sir Coley was super high and driving a Jefferson sports car and wrecked it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, all right, well, let's run with it. And I don't know. I mean, its presence doesn't bother me, but I could also been okay if it wasn't there.
Right. Like we think about like all the other stories, like the main stories of the film have consequences to their actions.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, like you said, just doesn't.
You know who, though, did not get by scot-free? The guy who tried to rob the convenience store.
I got you, you son of a bitch! Don't you right now?
Awesome! Totally awesome! All right, Hamilton.
That guy, damn, face full of hot coffee.
Face full of hot coffee. Save the day.
I thought that was a bit of a coming age moment for Brad. I thought it was where he used his anger management wisely. Instead of just spouting off and saying, fuck your refund. He actually did something good.
So just for the sake of argument, you're saying that was more mature than telling a guy, I'm going to kick 100% of your ass. Throwing coffee in someone's face and then holding a gun at him is more mature.
And then he said, there goes your ride.
He taunted him too.
Way to go, Hamilton.
His outburst, his anger, his management of that anger actually provided a positive result instead of a negative one. And I thought that was really good closure for his arc, that those moments were all negative. And then here's another moment where you think, oh man, this guy just can't catch a break.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes out on top. And he was due.
He was due. He needed a rebound. That's for sure.
So now that we've kind of talked about all these things, let's kind of each of us go around and give our overall opinion, your final thoughts, your closing arguments, if you will, for or against Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Brian, why don't you go ahead and kick it off?
Okay. I will sum it up by saying I appreciate what this movie was, but I don't appreciate what the movie is. So when the movie was made, it was fun, it was flippy, commentary on early 80s American high school culture. It is so far from what it is now. It's hard to separate yourself. And when I watch it now, I see so many lack of emotion during major events. And I know the screenwriter who wrote the book, who went undercover to depict actual high school behavior, stress, and coming of age. I thought it was totally unrelatable to any of my experience. And I wasn't that far off. I mean, I was a freshman in 1989. So technically I was in high school in the 80s for half a year, right?
Uh-huh.
And it was not like that at all. It was fun back then. I don't think it's close to holding up now. I don't regret watching it again. But I wouldn't feel motivated to watch it yet again in the future.
All right. Justin.
So I think I'm a victim of nostalgia here. While there's definitely parts of it that I find to be a little iffy, subject matter wise, acting wise, those kinds of things, character wise, story wise. I still look at it through those rose colored glasses, and I enjoyed watching it today. And I thought, to me, it held up as far as my expectations were. I'm having the inner Brian kind of feeling from like the last episode. My inner Justin. I'm standing in that line with my inner Justin. You know, my kid, preteen Justin.
Is it when watching this reminds you of how you felt when you watched it originally?
It did, and it brought a lot of those good, familiar chuckles. And, you know, like I remember it was like being 12, 13 years old watching this again.
I totally understand where you're coming from. I get it.
Would I sit down though and watch it again if, say, like a Sunday, if I'm flipping through the channels and it was on? I know it's going to be censored, but I'd probably still put it on. Would I sit down intentionally to watch it from beginning to end again? Probably not.
My initial thinking was, yeah, it held up. But then more I started thinking about it. It's a time capsule. It captures a moment of time. And it does a wonderful job. The quintessential soundtrack. It goes hand in hand with the movie. Great characters, great things, memorable, quotable. So many lines in this movie. So many things you'll still hear. So many references that'll still pop up. So much influence still had by this movie. But there are definitely parts that didn't age well. There's different things that could be done a little bit differently. Certainly things that wouldn't hold up today. And honestly, we didn't even get into this, but if any of these kids had a cell phone back then, it would be a very different story altogether.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, here's what stands out to me though. This is a movie about high school kids who are way too confident about the world, way too confident about what they know, way too confident about the things they're capable of. And when you boil it down, they're all a bunch of dumbasses. And time capsule or not, that's the facts. That's life. That's truth. And so, grand scheme of things, yes, I do think it holds up. Not in every way, but if you're only looking at the thematic elements, what this movie truly is about, abso-freaking-lutely, this movie holds up. I would recommend it for people. I will watch it again because I bought it on Amazon because it was free. I don't know how I had it free, but I went to rent it and it said I could buy it for $0. So by God, I will watch this movie again and I will enjoy it.
There you go.
You dick!
And on that note, that is a wrap on this episode of The Regular Guy Movie Show. We've broken it down, debated the highs and lows, and now it's your turn. Do you think this movie still holds up, or is it best left in the past? Feel free to leave a comment, give us a review, and add your 2 cents to the conversation. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe. And also, if you have a movie you'd like us to cover, let us know. We might just add it to the list for future episodes. Thanks for hanging out with us, and as always, be kind, rewind.
The Regular Guy Movie Show, talking flicks. Here we go!
Imagine Mike and Mark are actually the same person. Tyler Durden style in Fight Club.
Yeah, alter egos. Because they are polar opposites.
So it's Fight Club. They're just not making soap. They're scalping tickets.
Scalping tickets. Yeah.
you know, I just want to caution you guys. I don't think we're supposed to be talking about Fight Club.
Oh, shoot.
That is the first rule. And second rule.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just warning you.
All right.
All right.
I don't know. They might be listening.
Can we cut that out?
I could just censor it.
Flag it.
Yeah.
All we have to do is just say, kidding.
Ha 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 ha.
Yeah.
LOL.